Moonlight skims the frozen bog like a blade. The camera runs low and fast along a twin groove of ski tracks that seem to buzz with cold, a delicate graph written across the marsh. Breath fogs the lens once, hangs, crystallizes. The grooves arrow straight toward a dead spruce, ribs of wind-carved sastrugi lifting like waves frozen mid-break. The line is confident even, each stride a whisper. Then, 20 paces from the tree, they stop. No shuffle, no stumble, no break in rhythm, just the hard wind slab patch under the snag and a white expanse beyond it, unmarred. In minutes the wind will plane this page flat. One wrong read puts the logging road behind the trees within reach of men coming hard. Sergeant Hietala's shadow falls into frame first. He kneels where the last print ends, the motion practiced, respectful, as if stepping into a story mid-sentence. His glove comes off despite the cold. Skin hits air and stings, heat ripping away in a thin scream he can't take back. He tucks the glove under one elbow like a priest lifting a relic. The knife tip touches the crust, testing, notching, counting the crunch. Grain tells him wind direction, timing, hardness. He looks for spall from a boot toe, a pebbled flaw from a heel, the kind of tiny avalanche that follows a misstep. Nothing. No exit prints fanning left or right, no drag marks, no tidy pellet of blood that would make this a simple conclusion. The crust does not care about simple conclusions. He leans forward, nose almost against the snow, breath disciplined to a slow vapor. He listens. Ground this cold announces itself. A squeak under weight, a micro-snap under a shift. But the slab at his knees is glassed and silent, ice crystals bound by wind and pressure into a surface that, crossed gently, will not announce anything. He presses with the knife and the tip jumps back with a brittle crack. Any further weight would break it, unless the weight wasn't on the snow at all. The patrol behind him maintains distance, bodies ghost-lit by a knife of moon. White lumipuku blends with trunks and frosted deadfall. A man moves. The squeak of his ski tip would carry like a report, but someone has stuffed rags fat with grease over the points, and the night refuses to echo. Hietala raises a hand without looking back, a small flick, and all motion ceases. His breath hovers and drifts. The wind on the open bog is doing him a courtesy he cannot count on. It will shave the crust soon, erasing detail, flattening time. He needs to call this before the snow edits him out. The camera cuts to blue-black interior wood, spruce trunks tight like columns. Through them, another patrol moves, the missing one, weeks earlier in the plan and hours in the night. Lieutenant Koskinen's voice is a quiet carbon in the cold. Sever a forward telephone spur here, at the second junction after the bend in the road, he traced with a pencil stub on a smudged slate. Mark a mortar position by sound and by flash. They fire in threes, count in twos, lazy battery, then back before astronomical twilight, when the last darkness before dawn allows you one clean crossing of the open. He speaks like a man sure of the trees, but his fingers, when he grips the slate, are wooden with cold. The frostbite that stole feeling yesterday now steals weight and judgment too. Overconfidence in the familiar feels warm until it doesn't. The slate catches a stray breath and fogs, grease pencil lines smearing. Koskinen stops, wipes with the heel of a glove, smears again, turns the slate sideways, and draws a line of the logging road as a thicker, darker slash. The spur lines hang off it like veins. He circles the junction that matters, the one where a field phone cable splits toward a forward observer. Cut there, and the command line hum will not change at headquarters. Cut wrong, and every handset in the sector becomes an alarm. He taps the circle with the pencil, once, twice, fixing the risk into the men's heads. He doesn't say it, freeze or fight if compromised. The road must not be cut by them tonight. He doesn't need to say it. Every man tastes the wood smoke at Viipuri in the air. Back at the edge of the open, Hietala's mouth tightens around the word that wants to come out. Desertion, panic, snow tunnel. The first two he discards. There's no chaos in clean tracks and no sense in a man running into a skin of wind slab with no cover. The third, a fox's trick, would leave a sag, a vent, a warmth halo. He lays the back of his hand near the crust, searching for the faint thermal that snow sometimes whispers when hiding cavities. The cold is absolute. No breath return, no sublimation halo puffs away under the moon. He is left with what the wind offers him, a featureless white, and a timestamp he does not control rushing toward zero. Tail end of his last disaster, ghost flickers behind his eyes. Once, in a thaw, his misread led a squad into a line that looked like an easy run, and the line led straight to a dugout where men waited with guns and a pile of stolen kindling. He sees the blown snow flattening the wrong way, hears the quiet intake of breath before someone rolled a grenade, and feels the rush toward a silence that lasted for days. It's a whisper of hesitation now, enough to make his hand steady rather than bold. He does not want to lay his team on the altar of an elegant lie written in snow. The radio on the second man's chest crackles like a frost-bitten leaf burning. The handset is wrapped in cloth and stuffed into a pocket to preserve battery warmth. Even so, the on-off key is gummy, slow. A voice rattles through a cipher group, numbers truncated by static and the cold anisotropic crackle along frozen wire. They catch words in the gaps: platoon, skis, formation, farbog. The phrase silent corridor repeats, like someone tasting it, liking how it sounds. Hietala tugs the handset close, lips to the cloth, repeats what he thinks he heard, waits. The reply comes back out of phase, frequencies drifting. He can't know if command means act now or hold. Autonomy slides into his hands like a hot coal. Across the line, in deeper shadow, far from this clear patch, Captain Petrov stands over his map, pencil stabbing points that move slyly in both his imagination and his orders. He has been given a directive that sounds simple enough to the men who wrote it in a warm shack. Find their route tonight. Use their gap. He knows the road that the Finns use, the one that threads the marsh and timber like a rope, is worth more than a ribbon on his chest. Recklessness is a kind of logic when someone else takes the blame later, but he can feel the pressure behind his ears, a cold headache that is not from the wind. Clean signs are his drug. He thinks of ski grooves as rails to reward and knows he must act before the wind takes their scent. He steps outside, the air claws, and he breathes shallow to spare his lungs. His men hunch under the needles. He tells them what they already suspect. They will push on a corridor that might not be there. Ski bindings creak softly as straps are checked. Leather stiffens in this cold. Cracked edges drink moisture and shatter. One of his scouts flexes a toe strap, testing. He meets Petrov's gaze and nods like a gambler, spreading his last hand. Petrov hears a small voice laugh at this, a corner of his mind that knows how Finns turn edges and wins into something hungry. He ignores the voice. Pressure is a loud command. Hietala shifts his weight, and the crust answers with a silver whisper. He puts his glove back on, the fingertips already stiff as boards. He draws a small circle in the air toward the tree, then upward. The two men nearest him angle their eyes into the black tangle of spruce limbs above the wind-scoured patch. The camera tilts with them, a slow rise of perspective into the rib cage of the forest. There, it offers nothing but branches, a dead limb snapped off years before and dangling by fiber, and flakes of hoarfrost hung like teeth. He feels the idea without seeing evidence. Up is the only direction left when forward has been erased. He presses the knife hilt into the snow, a stake marking a clock. The wind comes in combs brushing away his memory. Each pulse resets the page. He stares at his own boot marks, crisp and guilty on a margin. If he circles, if he probes, he will write a second script for this stage, and Petrov will read whichever one he likes. He chooses stillness, the one thing wind cannot erase until it covers everything. Koskinen's men are already moving in the interior theater. The camera lingers on a white bedsheet unpacked and clipped to a taut rope swung between two trunks, the thing drooping, caught and pinned by ice, a sail that refuses to fill. A second cloth, a tent half, is pegged beside it. They are not barriers so much as shapes to be read, white rectangles trembling in the peripheral vision of anyone watching the tree line. Men unfurl them without a word, hands bare for the seconds necessary, skin sticking and peeling to cold metal where a carabiner does not cooperate. The bed sheets look ridiculous in the war dark. They are the war now. He has them strip their skis, lash them flat to their packs with the tails higher than the toes to keep weight distributed when it matters. The toe straps creak, one, old leather, popping faintly in protest. Carlo, the youngest, tugs and hears the thin scream of a tear he cannot afford. Koskinen's head snaps over. The boy, more boy than man suddenly, winds a bootlace through and around, making a Turkish hitch that will hold if the cold doesn't make a liar out of it. A broken stride later will draw a line in the snow like a confession. They have minutes to render that later moot. They rig the line. Over snow traverse, the manual would call it, if a manual existed for this. In reality, it's rope between trunks at shoulder height, tight as truth, tossed across 5 meters of deadly surface that will break and swallow a shin in half a step. A carabiner slips onto the rope, a second to hold apart a ski pole that becomes a spreader bar, one man hugging wood, sliding along until his weight transfers to the next trunk. It is slow. It is silent enough to be holy. Men unhook, hook, glide, their bodies horizontal in the waist-high darkness, feet aimed at stars they cannot see. One cough swallowed before it can bloom. On the bog, Hietala's breath freezes white along his scarf, making a hard crust of its own that tugs at his jaw when he moves. In the corner of his eye, a flare streak arcs somewhere off to their right, a white star that ignites, then sizzles and dies short in the wrong trees. Captured tubes turn spiteful in this cold. This one blossoms off target and falls not where the plan wants it. 6 seconds of light, no more, wash across a stand of spruce and a pale screen within them trembles. It is a gentle breathing where there should be none. Every head turns like magnets. Petrov's men see the same glow, delayed by distance, filtered through branches, translated into motion on their retinas. The white cloth looks like a squad turned sideways, the kind of phantom that kills. Petrov draws a breath to issue the order he knows he wants and isn't sure he owns yet. He sees the corridor in his mind like a throat waiting for words. The flare gutters and dies before his syllable shapes. Night returns like a door slammed. Hietala feels the gut pull that comes when a lure flashes in the shallows. He wants to put a bullet through the cloth just to reduce variables. He wants to withdraw to the thicker wood, to angles and cover and known ranges. His radio is a hesitant friend. The message it carries is 3 words, one of which might be corridor. He remembers that the road cannot be given, that his world has narrowed to a patch of silence and a rope line he has not yet found. He leans forward, glove wrapping the trunk at the edge of the wind slab, and his fingertips find something not smooth, a shallow groove. He peels frost with a thumbnail and sees a parallel mark at shoulder height in the bark, burnished and pale against the brown. Another, twin, a handspan apart. The wind has covered it with a gauze only seconds thick. It is a sign for men who think that forward is the only narrative. This one goes above. He imagines bodies sliding along it, frozen breath dribbling like wax, skis pointing toward a moon hidden by needles. He steps back, lets his eyes climb the invisible path. Whatever story the snow tries to tell by erasing itself, the wood tells another in ridges and fibers. He looks down at the perfect end to the tracks and understands it as a hinge, not a wall. The detail that misleads is the clean stop. The actual departure is up and along, not straight ahead. He hears his own heartbeat over the wind. He leans close to his number 2, and the whisper is an answer and a warning at once. "They didn't go forward," he says, and the camera obeys, tilting its eye into the black treetops where the next movement waits to be seen. The tree line swallows the last footprint as if the forest itself closed over it. The spruce limbs are heavy with rime, each needle glazed and glittering in a brittle moon that offers more bite than light. Hietala's breath plumes and sifts away. He takes his glove in his teeth and bares fingers to the knife-cold air, palm hovering just above the final print, as if warmth could coax an answer. Wind begins to comb the open bog behind him, sastrugi ridges sharpening, surface crystals hissing as they migrate. Minutes and this spot will be a memory, he thinks, and the wrong kind of memory makes a grave look like a door. He eases forward on his haunches to the edge of a dead spruce whose lower branches have been long snapped away. The snow under it is a different language, wind-scoured, crusted, a shallow saucer where a gust pinned powder and then cut it. He holds his knife tip to the crust and applies a dull pressure. The blade meets resistance, then slides in a centimeter and stops. A slab. Wind slab that will bear a fraction of a man's weight if coaxed, but not a boot sole stabbing down. There are no post holes, no flares of shattered crust, only that clean ending where the last ski kissed the snow and then decided nothing more needed to be shown. A sudden flurry blows through like a curtain pulled hard across a window. The camera blurs on flying grains, then finds Hietala's hand as he lifts and brushes along the dead spruce trunk, searching where the snow cannot say. On the bark, at the height of his shoulder, a change in texture catches his eye. He wipes harder, and the frost gives way to 2 faint parallel lines cut into the outer bark, pale against the gray. Rope burns, not deep, but undeniable. He lifts his arm to line them with his own shoulder and sees in that alignment the angle a body would take if weight hung suspended between 2 trees. Over snow traverse. Rare, slow, and silent when done right, and something you do when you want your footprints to stop speaking. We cut backward in time the way a thought rewinds when it finds a new groove. Koskinen's patrol moves under the same dead spruce, but we are nose-close now, hands in white lumipuku sleeves, fingers raw and cracked from cold, unbuckling old leather toe straps with breath puffing into little sublimation halos that ring the steel like ghosts. Skis kissed off, tied together in a long flat bundle, bound to packs so the edges sit like wings, spreading weight. A rope snakes from under a snow-dusted tarp, already strung and humming imperceptibly in the cold like a violin string. On the rope, small metal glints, a carabiner scavenged from some climber's kit, a pulley wheel intended for a sled rig, both wrapped with strips of cloth to kill sound. 2 of the men have tucked ski poles sideways through their packs to spread their center of mass, to turn their bodies into the same distributed load that lets a fox walk on a crust that would betray a man. Koskinen himself is a white smear against the spruce, frost pinned into his mustache like a confession. He taps the rope with a mittened knuckle, tests the tension, then nods. His eyes are bloodshot marbles, the pupils small against snow glare, and the frostbite has stolen enough sensation from his fingers that his grip looks careless when it is not. They have rehearsed this once in a stand of birch where a boy on skis used to play. That boy is probably at the front elsewhere now, but the muscle memory is here. Clip the carabiner to the rope, slide sideways, knees bent, toes pointed to keep boots off crust. No footprints, no drag, no blood, only a man becoming a small mechanical problem moving through a hole in the forest. The radio on Hietala's back coughs and crackles, a complaint of copper and pitch against the cold. He presses his ear close to the handset, turns his head to shield it with his cap. Frozen 2-wire lines crackle and pop in a way that sounds like distant gunfire flooding into static. Cipher groups drowning in the noise. The voice he catches is chopped into units. Platoon. Forming. Far bog. Silent corridor. He repeats the words back in a monotone so the frost on his breath doesn't spike into the microphone and betray them with a snap. A Soviet ski platoon is forming out beyond the open marsh to his south, attempting to find a passage they believe the Finns have found, a nowhere that goes somewhere. If they push it tonight, the logging road that drags food and wounded to the rear can be cut by dawn. We cross to Petrov's map slate in a dimly lit dugout, the camera breathing in the warm ochre glow of a candle guttering down to a stub. Grease pencil lines smear and shine. A glove edge pushes them around like a tide. His finger taps the white rectangle that means the bog, then the narrow black bight that is the logging road. He is told with a voice dampened by snow and distance to make something happen, to stop watching ice and start cutting fins. He is smart enough to see the traps and tired enough to walk into one if he must. Clean signs are sirens to his kind. He's trained to chase tracks because tracks testify. But here the only testimony is the silence where prints should be, and that silence is suddenly loud. He decides before he can be told not to decide. Under the canopy, Koskinen's white camouflaged men become silhouettes only when the camera wants them to, ghosting along the taut rope like beads on a string, their skis strapped awkwardly to the packs, adding wings to their backs. One man, Private Veikko Lane, a farmer's son with big hands, reaches to transfer his weight to a new line between spruces when the leather toe strap he left dangling from a ski tail snags a stub of broken branch. The strap snaps like a twig. The sound is small, a mosquito of noise in the howling hush, but the consequence is specific. A broken strap means someone may have to walk with skis carried, leaving deep prints like wounds. Lane clamps his jaw and tries to collect the dangling two-holed strip before it slaps across the bark again. Koskinen's eyes cut to him and hold for a heartbeat, as if to calculatedly freeze the problem, then move away. They can't leave a leather arc that screams of a failure. Not here. Not under this tree. They rig a patch without a word. Koskinen saws a slit in a length of white bedsheet with his knife, threads the cloth through the ski's toe holes, knots it flat and wide to distribute force. One of the men rubs rag and pork fat over the ski tips, a trick learned from a grandfather. In this cold, snow squeaks under glass edges, and fat dulls it. The repair will hold until the next traverse, and maybe not beyond. It is a promise wrung from fabric. They know that if the strap fails on open crust, Lane will punch through and write a confession in deep holes that point straight back. They move again, and the camera watches how the rope takes each man, the pulley shushing, the speed a controlled slide that leaves the wind slab unbroken beneath. Hietala stands and looks not at the snow, but through it, following the geometry of where someone would have to go if they weren't allowed to touch the ground. Between the dead spruce and the next live one, the bow line dips. You would have to lower your hips to keep your boots out of the crust. He moves aside, looking for a sign at a height a man's shoulder would pass by. He finds another pale abraded strip on bark, a mirror of the first. A search shifts axes, from footprints to fingerprints on the underbellies of trees. It means they had time to rig, patience to commit, and a plan that assumes pursuit. He tastes his old fear of blown trails, that memory of a line of boots he thought he could erase, marching straight to a dugout where men slept and never woke. He wants to call for a halt, to keep more boots from writing any more stories here, but he has an enemy who reads too. The wind, helpful and treacherous in equal parts, scrapes the open bog clean in pulses, each gust resetting the page. The camera pulls back to show the empty whiteness to the south, where Petrov's probe will come, the sastrugi ridges chiseling themselves sharp as knife backs. Hietala knows he has little time before surface detail changes enough to make any small story he finds into a question mark. He marks the dead spruce on the lee side, the side that watchers won't glance at, with a sliver of inner bark cut away, thin and pale, a Finnish scout's private sign that a place matters. He has no guarantee that he will be the one to come back here. He scratches with his knife, hides the gleam with a pinch of old snow, then clicks his radio to send a truncated report as if it were a flare, too. The report crosses the gap as a sequence of grunts and hisses. Somewhere in that noise, a sentence survives. Suggest shift search vertical. Over snow traverse. No forward sign. The answer comes back with the command voice clipped to fit through the crackle. Hold. Do not expose. Soviet platoon massing. He gets, too, a reference to a silent corridor flagged by intercept, a zone of dead radio and perceived safety out on the bog that a Soviet captain is about to believe in. Hietala looks at the wind-swept gleam and sees where he will want to walk and where the other man will, and between them a space where either can die. Koskinen's line of men reaches the far hub of their moving spiderweb, a thicker trunk, a node of rope and pulleys checked in the dark by fingers that cannot feel. One breath of wind rattles the carabiner teeth. The tiny metallic fishbone jingle stabs against the undersong of the forest. A man flinches, and the camera feels the flinch travel. Above them, the moon pitches sideways as thin cloud runs under it. Darkness deepens, just for 2 handfuls of seconds. One of those perfect scheduled moments the patrol planned to cross an open vein of clearing. Astronomical twilight measured with a matchbook and a prayer. We see now, for the first time, the static white sheet strung low between 2 saplings just inside the timberline, trembling in a wind that is not because the forest shields it. It is clipped with wooden clothes pegs, taut enough to flutter, but slack enough to give a mirage of bodies moving behind it. 3 more hang down the line on invisible cords that are really on purpose. This is motion you can see from across a bog, at the perfect angle, when a platoon is looking for the ghost of a squad. The white bed sheets are not shelter tonight. They are bait, hung like clean laundry in a dead woman's yard. On Petrov's side, skis bite and hiss as his point men angle off the main sled trail into the powder at the bog's edge. The wind has done him the favor of erasing yesterday and the day before, leaving only a single new set of tracks that stride to the dead spruce and end. He shoulders his SVT-38 and feels the return spring stiff in the deep cold, optics on the rifle sweating into frost at the edge of his breath. He tells himself that a gap has to exist because the Finns are moving supplies that his return reports cannot account for. A silent corridor, the intercept says, and he has found a silence that looks like one. He lifts a gloved hand and opens his fingers to signal a fan-out, his men stepping like ballet under the white sky, each balancing the promise of speed against the threat of cracking crust. Inside the trees, Koskinen's plan begins to show teeth. A firing lane has been cut weeks ago, quietly, sap-cleaned, branches trimmed on the side that looks inward, not out, so that a man moving through the trees can see out, but a man outside sees only black and white weave. The LS-26 sits in a nest between 2 spruce, barrel jacket, frosted faintly where a prior shot sublimated snow and left a halo. The man on the trigger wets his lips and tastes salt and iron under the greasy scent of ragged firing oil, wondering if the barrel heat will throw another ring of steam that a flare could reveal. A Mosin-Nagant to the left nestles on crossed sticks, sight hood dusted with snow so fine it looks silk. The angles intersect at an impossible place if you think the Finns are in front of you where the sheet trembles. Hietala's boot heel treads on a buried wire. He freezes. It is not tripwire, but telephone, 2-wire line, slack between snow and low branches, disguised by frost. He crouches and flips it with a finger, feels the lightness. It's dead on a spur, not under current, but useful. It ties these woods to someone else's ear. If Koskinen cut a spur to isolate a forward observer, it would be near a junction where lines braid and split. Hietala's knife hand twitches. Cut it, and you blind one eye. Leave it, and you let a watcher call a correction that murders your own. He holds the line and feels the decision buzz. The afterglow from the stray flare still haunts the eye. Koskinen reads the risk in that thin residual light and lifts 2 fingers at his gunner, then flattens them, a sign to hold fire until something worse than a glow appears. The sheet out at the edge flutters once more on its wire. In the near dark, every tremor acts like a voice. Petrov's men stop mid-glide, snow hissing to a halt under heels. The white sheet in the trees ripples like a column, like 3 men moving with discipline along a sapling line. His point man raises the DP-27, and the drum looks like a moon. The first shot cracks, tearing a flap of sheet into a bird that dies mid-flutter. Snow explodes from a birch trunk beside the place where it hung. For an instant, the line of return fire that should answer from the tree line doesn't. The Finns are waiting, trusting the angle that says distance is their friend. Then a single muffled shot from deep inside the timber punches a coin of ice off a branch 20 meters left of where any Soviet eye expects. A test, a measurement, the warning tap on a glass that means the show is about to start. Hietala sees Petrov's line flatten into cover that does not exist on a bog. The sastrugi's sharp ridges become shields because men must pretend they are. He knows the corridor is false, the bait is working. He also knows that once Petrov tests the sheet with a second burst and does not receive a full answer, he may edge along the line, find the real firing slits by accident, or worse, decide to swing wide and come in on the logging road while Hietala wastes time mapping rope burns on bark. He feels his own flaw tug at him, that hesitation at ambiguous signs that made him cautious and careful and sometimes late. He has to decide whether to leave the corridor open, to pull back his own men, to compress the path that will draw Petrov into the lane the Finns have sown with needles. He moves finally, not with his boots, but with his voice made tiny through the radio. He tells the listening ear at the company CP to open the timber a breath, not a shout, to let the decoy breathe. He asks for no flares and gets only the hiss of an answer. He cancels the cut he wanted to make on the telephone line and instead follows it with his eyes to where it kinks around the base of a pine, looking for that junction that would give Koskinen a reason to be here at all. If the cut is made correctly, a forward Soviet observer sits with a dead handset, blind to correction, making Petrov's next move even more unguided. He cannot find the junction. That absence is either a sign his patrol is better than he is, or a sign that the sound of fat on steel and sheets on pegs is not bait, but cover for an operation already completed. Inside, behind the white sheet that no longer moves, a man with a Mosin slides the bolt home without the metallic report anyone would hear. He has wrapped the handle in a bandage of cloth greased with pork fat, and the bolt's cam surfaces wear the same film. It is an absurd detail that saves a life, sound reduced to the breath of a man who has learned to exhale on the press. The barrel sits cantilevered through a slit cut in a pile of brush, its halo of sublimated snow cooled off. The man presses cheek to stock and waits for a green flare that will not come. If flares will not cooperate with time, then only timing will. Koskinen turns to his runner, a boy with a map slate tucked into his coat. The boy wipes it with a sleeve, and the grease lines smear, their edges blurring where the cold fogs the lens of the camera and his own eyes. He draws with a glove edge, marking the angle of Petrov's approach, the fan, the predicted fallback along a ridge they cannot see from here, but which they know is there by how the wind writes. He writes, too, a single point, the dead spruce with rope burns, their hinge, their story's pivot. Because if anyone must return to scrub and smooth, to make it immaculate again, someone will need to find the exact scar in the exact light. He taps the slate, and the runner goes, the map tucked under his coat so it will not crack like ice when he bends. The squall that began as a curtain returns now as a wall. It rips across the bog like a great hand, dragging a foam of powder, and every sign Hietala counted on begins to disappear. The last visible splay of a ski tail at the ending print fills with snow and shells over. The pale rope burns on bark fog with fresh rime, hiding again in plain sight. If he leaves now, the corridor the Soviets think they have will look perfect. If he stays, he might be trapped in a fade that will erase his way back, and the mental map will become a snowdrift in his head, moving every time the wind shifts. He turns his face into the loss and chooses to trust the men inside the trees who have planned the moment when white becomes a blade. Beyond the bog, Petrov lifts his hand a second time and then clenches it, signing a new advance. His orders from the dugout gloat in his ear. Make contact, make contact, make contact. Each repetition a weight. He sets his jaw against the cold that has climbed into his teeth and cracks thin ice on his mustache with the edge of his tongue. He wants to use a flare. He wants to turn night into day and day into proof. But he has learned not to light the sky when the Finns have glass with longer eyes. He halves the distance instead on his own, skis whispering, rifle tight. In the trees, something returns the whisper. It is not their light. It is the tremor of a white sheet moving again, this time from a hand. And whatever that shadow told him, it tells him enough to raise the muzzle and breathe in. The Soviet platoon fills that darkness with its next breath, and unseen, a rifle bolt slides home inside the timberline. They come thin and careful, silhouettes of felt hats and frost-whitened scarves, skis whispering until the bog's wind crust squeaks like teeth. Petrov's palm cuts the air and the file breaks into pairs, DP-27's pan glinting once as a cloud slides off the face of the moon. The corridor lies ahead, a strip of nothing between two walls of black spruce, the kind of emptiness officers write about as an opportunity. Behind the trees, a canvas breathes, white, motion held taut by a rigging line that answers the gusts out of sync with the wind, an animal flinch that invites misreading. Hietala watches from a shadow shelf, 3 trunks in, cheekbone against scarf to feel the vibration of a ground air under the overstory. His breath fogs and is flattened sideways by a low drift that snakes past his ankles. Between him and the bog are his own boot prints, crossed and brushed again until they have the polite void of untouched snow. His hand closes on the pistol sling just to feel leather, to ground him against the pull of the blown trail that lives behind his eyes. The time he read a sastrugi ridge as a man's edge and brought fire onto a dugout. A twig cracks somewhere in the trees, and every track on the bog pauses as if it heard it too. Under the crust, ice grinds softly, the bog's slow exhale, and the squall that smeared the signs returns in miniature, a skirl passing, biting exposed skin and carrying flake glitter that confuses depth. Hietala lifts his field glass and drags the lens edge on an arc up the trunks. There, 2 pale grooves in a felled spruce's bark, parallel, shoulder height, where powder gathered earlier and then was blown clean. The grooves run away toward the ridge, a highway in the air that ends in needles and black. He tilts the glass lower, checks the clearing for barrel halos. But the cold is stealing even that betrayal, dulling heat, so the air seems honest. In the timber line, Koskinen lies on his back with snow pressed into his ear flaps, skis lashed against his rucksack to the shape of a second spine. The rope rig skims above him, taut as a violin string, bits of carabiner biting frost. He can taste fat. They rubbed rags with it and wound them over ski tips to keep them from squeaking. He can taste the ghost of it as he mouths his mitten to blow warmth back into the joints. He thinks of the phone spur they cut hours ago, the 2-wire hiding under a frail drift near a junction, a quiet snip that amputated a forward observer from his parent line. He thinks how their grease pencil map smeared when he breathed on it, how the curve of the contour they need to hold goes through this corridor, and how the black of the trees is the only thing that will forgive their presence. Beside him, a man's heel twitches. It is not fear. A leather toe strap snapped an hour back, under load as they hauled along the traverse. They had to lash the ski against the calf and carry the weight on a soft tread shuffle, leaving a single deep print like a stray word in an immaculate page. They had brushed it, gentled it flat, but Koskinen knows the ground remembers, knows how a flaw hurries the eye, pulls men onto a line they think they see. He counts breaths to hide the tempo of his own urgency and listens for Petrov's voice. Static eats at the Lithuanian man's syllables and spits them back as a staccato of consonants in Petrov's ear. The handset is warm against his cheek, the line crackling with frost stiffness, cipher groups flattening into nonsense. The last readable demand was clear enough. Reconnaissance in force now. He is tired of the cold laying a weight on decisions. He looks at the corridor and sees a gift, the kind of clean geometry that can make a career. Motion where there should be none, the white sheet, a tremor, and no other sign crossing. A perfect corridor draws a line down his nerves, and he decides not to wait for clarity. His signalman lifts an arm, flare in glove, and Petrov catches the motion with a click of his tongue. No flares here. The cold makes the captured tube spiteful, and the last time a burst turned snow into glittering shrapnel in a place that mattered, his men's shadows stretched long and paid for it. He feels the group's urge to spill forward and keeps them held by the thin rope of his hand in the air. He listens. Wind, the small chew of ice, the nothing of Finnish silence. He misreads it as absence rather than arrangement. Hietala's throat tightens on a warning he cannot send. The frozen telephone line to his rear copse is a useless cord. He scraped a bark sliver on a lee side trunk earlier to mark a return point, and now his fingers find it without looking. The gray cut under his glove, the private sign that says, "Here." In the same moment, he sees a faint halo pulse and vanish in the timber line, a breath that sublimated in a shape near waist level. A firing lane cut out of brush at that height would drag a bullet across a man's thigh or gut, a choice that wounds rather than kills clean, slowing a column under the guise of mercy. He has to choose whether to close the corridor, throw a shot across it to spook Petrov into a bypass that would roll up the flank, or hold breath and leave bait. He lets the breath out and becomes the kind of stillness that borders on prayer. He leaves the corridor open. The decision drags on his scar of memory, the blown trail, the dead, but the arithmetic is ruthless. If Petrov is to break, he needs to break inside the box already built. Hietala moves his glove halfway toward the LMG's assistant gunner as if a touch could push cold oil into action without a sound. He stops short and folds the hand into his sleeve. Motion, even inside the trees, is a currency he cannot spend. Inside the timber line, the LMG, the LS-26, short barrel, box magazine like a shovel sliced flat, sits on a bed of saplings trimmed down to cradles. The firing lane there is not a straight line, but a weave, its gaps masked with snow pins and a white tent half hung on winter bare shrubs. The cloth screen out on the bog, fluttering like a body, is connected by a wire to a sapling. A man toes the line, and the screen moves in a breath, a puppet of wind cues. Koskinen wants to smile at the cheapness of it, the audacity, but his face does not have warm enough blood to spend on that, either. Another squall edges across the bog, and the sastrugi lurch sharper, small drifts humping up and collapsing like startled creatures. Petrov places his men as paintings, two to a sapling, one along the right with the DP-27, one left with the SVT-38 shouldering the role of reach. He is counting the seconds that the cloud devours the moon, and knowing that, moves on the darkest portion, picking what he believes is cover. In this kind of night, minutes have further, as nerves turn time into a thing that rattles in the pocket. He lifts his hand again, a flick that means forward. A flare misfires somewhere deeper along the line, white light knifing the wrong sector for a hard blink. It picks out, for an instant, a faint wet on a knot in the rope traverse where cloth didn't fully dull metal, then vanishes. Petrov squints against the afterimage and loses the line again. Hietala files the glimpse away and refuses to chase it with his eyes, because stare is motion and motion gets red. The true rig reveals itself in negatives. A low lump in the snow where a hauler has dug heels under for purchase. The faint scrape scallop at knee height on a trunk where a carabiner bit wall-coated bark. Koskinen's shoulders ache from the previous traverse. They had unclipped and slid, handed from trunk to trunk, along an air path, a slow underhand throw of bodies. The thing had been built for going out, not for coming back under stress. The return meant trusting hands numbed by cold to keep a grip on metal that eats warmth on contact like an animal. He glances at the broken strap again, at the way a first-step shift could drag a wind slab enough to crack, and recalculates what his men can do if they have to move fast. Petrov tries to read the snow. The sharp edges along the open marsh draw precise lines that feel like direction, but sastrugi lie. He sees an arrow in an accident and leans his plan against it. If he throws his platoon down the corridor, he will cut the road, catch a breath of Finnish echelons moving wounded, and crates of ammunition like a heart pumping in winter. He cannot smell the fat on the Finns' ski tips or see the hunkered shape of a weapon angled to snip men. He hears only the quiet, and quiet is the most seductive roar there is in war. In the trees, a man's finger finds the thin point of the LS-26's trigger without shaking. He is the one with the broken strap lashed to calf, the one who will have to carry his own weight if they are forced to move. He thinks of the strap as a word he cannot pronounce, while the language he has to speak is silence. His breath touches the barrel jacket and vanishes in a halo a size too small to be seen by anyone not already inside this circle of light. He feels the gun not as a machine, but as a line connecting his body to the clearing where Petrov's men are, and does not draw it yet. Hietala angles his head and catches a whisper of Russian from Petrov's point. Hand signals do not hold speech entirely in check. A single word leaks. Corridor. He almost laughs, a dry sound that would be louder than a shot in this situation. The wrong detail has done its work. The absence of exit prints, the false clean end that suggested men vanished forward, keeps Petrov thinking like the ground is a plain. The reality is up and along. Hietala finds the felled spruce's rope scars again with the edge of his sight and files them away as proof for someone alive in the morning. A minute becomes many. The snow ceases its drift for the length of a held breath and then starts again. Each start sloughs a whisper off the white screen in the bog, each whisper a little call. Petrov draws his first fire lane mentally and places a man to answer it, then places the matching opposite without realizing he is built into the Finn's figure. He is a competent officer making a clean plan. Clean plans are brittle in weather like this. He thinks the clean line is his. He does not know he is standing in someone else's razor. Koskinen lifts 2 fingers in front of his own eyes and drops them an increment, an order measured in bone rather than volume. The man on the wire answers with a toe pressure, and the white sheet out there breathes in time with a sigh. It looks like a squad leaning. In the same movement, a rifle bolt eases forward somewhere deep, a Mosin-Nagant answering a DP-27's metal heartbeat with one of its own. The sound is small, but in a forest that eats everything larger, it becomes the note that hangs. A radio coughs. Petrov hears it, not Finnish, one of his own men keying without thought as a glove brushes the switch, a burp of nonsense groups mushed by cold. He shuts it down with his spine. A glare. The air has that drawn glass quality now that comes before something breaks. He can choose to wait, to pull back and circle, to test edge and frequent tree instead of punching center, but the order that lives in the handset rides him hard. He sets his jaw, drops his hand, and the first pair glides. From the timber line, the impossible angle speaks. not the corridor, but a slice from slightly behind, a tunneled shot through brush Hietala, earlier noted, at waist height. A single muffled round that lifts snow from a birch trunk beside Petrov's point man and sprays it into his ear. He flinches sideways, and the man behind him checks to keep from stabbing his ski into calf, and the small stagger ripples. The white screen breathes again, as if a squad has shifted to fire. A DP-27 barks back automatically, and bullets go into cloth and brush and clouds of powder that will look like moving bodies in the corner of eyes already convinced. The ground starts telling lies fast. Men fire at movement that is hung on a wire. The flat pan of a DP catches a stray round and rings like a plate. The Finns answer from an angle that makes no sense if you believe the corridor is truth. Petrov's captain sense snaps to it, and he realizes the geometry is wrong, but his men are already in the box, skis crossing, long guns awkward. He can either pull them back through their own tangle or push them hard to the timber to find the seam. Either choice eats men. Hietala hears the first Finnish gun breathe and tastes copper in his mouth. He finds the LMG's muzzle flash, the faintest spike of light quickly strangled by cloth and snow mufflers, and sees the sublimation halo drift across in a pattern he knows will mark it for anyone with patience. He trusts Petrov will not have any now. He lifts his own rifle and lays the post not on a chest, but on the web of a glove near a trigger. Slow the hands. Slow the approach. The wind shifts a hand's width, and he waits it out, the discipline of a man who has seen eagerness ruin a plan. Another mischief, the frozen telephone line behind Petrov's leftmost pair sings like a glass if you put your ear to it, crackling with cold. One of the Russians, a boy with a red scarf under his white canvas, drops his head for a second, as if to listen, and a bullet flicks snow where his ear just was. The sense that ears are being targeted, that the fire is surgical, moves through the squad like a cold fire, tightening shoulders. Their flares live heavy in pockets, 50 grams of decision each. Koskinen feels the timing break open inside him. This is the darkest point. In 10 minutes, the moon will slide, and the corridor will gain a silver, and with that silver will come the truth of angles. He has to bleed them now without letting them know where to place their answer. He shifts the LS-26's traverse 2 fingers and sends 3 rounds into snow in front of feet. Snow that leaps like fish, and he hears the deep animal noise that comes from a man whose body thinks it is falling. That noise is a wedge he can use. Petrov curses in his throat. He peels 2 men right to hunt the impossible angle, resolving to reach the trees not in the clean corridor, but at a small side break where a birch leans. He has chosen to push. A part of him registers that this is exactly what an enemy would want. A larger part knows that if he backs out under fire now, the line behind him will feel a retreat, and the road beyond will become a river of carts and wounded men without a guard. He makes the ugly choice and owns it. Hietala's heart kicks once hard. This is his hard choice, too. He could shift his rifle to kill the captain and throw the platoon into a headless crush, guaranteeing panic in a small radius that could spill free of the box. The other option is discipline. Pick joints, slow feet, stretch the fight just enough to draw them into the interior where the kills will be quieter, fewer rounds, less blaze to summon others. He keeps the discipline. The memory of a dugout burned by his mistake holds his hand. A powder gust tumbles through, and for a second the white screen collapses in on itself, slack like a dead thing, then snaps back as the line jerks. It looks like victory to the men on the bog, like a target hit. They surge without command. The map slate in Hietala's pocket warms enough from his body that the grease line he drew earlier for this very scenario smears. He can't show anyone the elegance of this later with the same crispness it has in his head. He lets go of future testimony and stays in the present. In this present, the smallest detail is the hinge on which both sides swing. The end of tracks in the open, immaculate, has misled them into rediscovering the wrong axis of movement. The real path, the one that matters, is the one up, the one along, the one that returns to its own hinge to rebrush, leave no exit, make absence loud. Hietala wonders if anyone else will see the rope burns in morning light, or if the new drift will fill their pale, clean lines. He decides he doesn't care as long as the road holds. A green flare, Soviet, finally claws its way into the sky from farther back where a second element waits, burning long and high, drip-burning sparks into snow. It turns every falling flake into shrapnel again, paints the white screen the color of sickness, makes shadows of branch and barrel stand out like confessions. This is the 6 seconds that could compromise the traverse, that could show the rope, the carabiner, the ash-frayed edge of cloth hung in the brush. Eyes jump to it by training. Koskinen doesn't let the light rule the choice. He sends a snap of rifle fire from deeper in to pull attention away from the brighter sins. 3 shots spaced like a heartbeat. Petrov turns to that false report half a degree, and his men, hungry for direction, follow the turn. In that twist, they open the angle that Hietala needed, a wedge to feed their own fire like wind on a small coal. The LS-26 coughs once and then goes quiet. Its operator swaps a magazine in a motion he can make with gloves on without feeling the metal teeth, a practice that now lives as muscle without nerve. His partner's fingers find the mag's back seam by counting breaths, because counting seconds here is treachery. The gun comes back up and places bullets not into men, but into the graze-high snow where the skin of the bog meets the cut brush, sending a white wall up to blind the next pair. It is carving, not smashing. This is the new revelation. The corridor is not a channel for travel, but for perception. Petrov has been walked into an idea, and ideas are dangerous terrain. The Finns have used rope and cloth and wind and the human hunger for simple lines to make the snow itself fight. The patrol that vanished did not vanish. It simply stepped sideways into the air. The missing footprints did not end. They curled over the shoulder of an old spruce and went home along their own tongue. The corridor is a black seam between 2 ranks of spruce, wind scouring the open bog into a glassy skin, each sastrugi crest a knife of shadow. Petrov's skiers glide single file, white smocks like blown ash, poles tucked to avoid the squeak the cold forces from baskets. He picks the cleanest edge, no cross tracks, no churned sluice, pressured by the order folded in his breast pocket, damp from condensed breath. Reconnaissance in force tonight. He trusts the neat, trusting the absence as sign, not signal, and steps into an alley that does not breathe like forest, but like set stage. Hietala, 30 meters off, prone behind a nurse log, watches Petrov's column angle toward the wrong brightness, where the misfired flare had burned an after-image into the snow's gloss. He feels his old mistake breathe on the back of his neck, leading an enemy by clean signs once, an avoidable line straight as a plumb to a dugout. And the urge to shout freezes in his throat. Under him, ground temperature squeaks, the squeal of powder crystals pinched by double weight, and his cheek burns against the stock in a way no glove can halt. He has to choose to let the column pass deeper into the box, or to blow the ruse by warning shots and light. The white bedsheet snow screen set earlier by Koskinen's men trembles on its thin rope. No wind pushes at it. It moves because a line somewhere else is being paid out. A ghost puppet. The sheet's soft undulation reads as a squad shifting weight behind cover to anyone thinking in men, not knots, a mistake Petrov's forward pair makes as they veer their muzzles toward it. A muffled shot snaps from another angle, a bark-punched puff of snow spitting from a birch trunk inches from the Soviet pointman's cheek. He flinches into the gap, away from the feint, deeper into where the timberline has been stitched with short, clean lanes like slits in a white curtain. Koskinen lies behind one slit, breath pooling against his scarf until his mustache hangs with hoarfrost in the shape of the mouth he refuses to open. The Lahti-Saloranta lies on its partial bipod between two roots, barrel wrapped with a strip of blanket, front sight dusted with snow to kill the shine. He counts Petrov's lead skis by their sound, the muted tick of basket against crust, because the powder squall that had come and gone left fine sleet on branches, and now a single touch sends glitter to the ground like throwing gravel. He waits until the second file fans in response to the decoy, because he wants spread, not stack, for his first burst. Hietala slides his glove off and presses 2 fingers into the snow he'd earlier brushed flat near the end of track's hinge, feeling for crust thickness as if it were a living skin with veins. The wind slab bears weight if you spread it, if you move with poles and rope instead of stomping. And he sees in his mind how Koskinen used the over-snow traverse, how rope and ski poles, piquet to piquet between black spruce, took men like beads on a wire above a surface that would betray only fools. He also sees the flaw. One snapped toe strap, and a man forced to carry his skis would punch through and leave a deep heel, a signature as loud as a flare. That broken strap did snap. One of Koskinen's men had cursed once and then stuffed rags with fat over the remnants to mute the smacks. Ski lashed wrong to his pack, shoes sinking at the traverse landing. The landing had been rebushed, brushed and patted, and brushed again with a fir bough, until Hietala's eye would pass it at speed. But the stress remains. If Petrov's skiers find that one soft patch with a probing pole, the hinge is blown, and the whole trick, up and along, not forward, gives itself away. Hietala licks cracked lips and tastes iron, decides not to touch the hinge again. Let it be immaculate. Let it tempt. Petrov raises 2 fingers and signals a split. He is good, the documentary voice suggests, under stress but trained, yet tonight he is hurried. He has stood too long under men who grade outcomes by movement, and his ear is tuned to simple. Where there is no exit, there is opportunity. His forward scouts drift toward the trembling sheet. His flanking 3 push toward the darker firs where tracks should have continued if anyone had kept going on the ground. He assumes the Finns left by bowing out laterally, not vertically, blind to the rope groove faint as a healed scar on a felled spruce 6 feet up, because the powder squall that would have chalked it waited until after he committed. The flare that ruined sector timing, 6 bright wrong seconds, did one more thing. It pinched the pupils of every man in the column, wiped their night's hard-won dilation clean. For another 20 breaths after it died, the forest was blacker to them than it was to the Finns lying cold with closed eyes and their pupils still wide, and those breaths are when pulled triggers matter most. The first crack from Koskinen's lane is more a cough muffled by rag around muzzle, but 3 men in white jerk and fall forward as if kneeling, poles splay like broken insect legs. The DP gunner behind Petrov flinches, a disc magazine pale in moonlight, and when he rips off a stutter of return fire, breath fog curls from his mouth and hangs like a signal. Breath betrays. At 25°C, every exhale is a plume. At 25°C, every barrel exhales, too, heat-making halos in micro-ice that ring like coronas around bore mouths in the right angle of brittle moon. Hietala, on a different lane, sees a faint donut of soft fog bloom high and left where no man stands and realizes one of Petrov's men has taken a tree crotch half up. He pivots, fires once at the halo, and the shape within it folds into branches, not man, but snow, blown loose by other gunfire. He smiles inwardly at his own almost mistake, the memory of the blown dugout trail pressing him not to chase shadows. He lowers, breathes, waits for real movement. The white screen flutters again, jerkier, and a second decoy farther left answers, a conversation across the gap with cloth and line. Petrov thinks he sees 3 men shifting, then 5. The clean corridor becomes a crowded alley in his mind. He orders suppressive fire at the screens, smokes the wrong air, feeds his own echo. Splinters skip from trunks nowhere near the firing lanes. The moment he commits to the fabric, Koskinen rolls his gun 1 degree, sweeping the knees of Petrov's flanking trio as they bend into their push. Snow erupts from their trousers, the sound of a man sucking cold air to scream, cut off clean by frozen snot and pride. Misjudgment accumulates like rime on a beard. Petrov's radio operator, swaddled like a snowman, cranks a call home, but the 2-wire telephone somewhere ahead, the one Koskinen crossed the line to cut, has isolated an observer. Orders are going out on the backside, not coming into the front. On the Finnish side, cipher groups spit and crackle, groups of numbers turning to holes mid-phrase, and Hietala knows that any plea to command for permission will settle after the fight's new geometry is already drawn. Autonomy rises. He looks left to where a junior conscript beside him sucks a wool mitten and shakes. He places the boy's hand on the second magazine and nods him into stillness, a decision to own this yard of trees without consensus. A flare arcs green from Petrov's rear, burns with that familiar hiss, and for a moment the world turns to glittering shrapnel again. Snow and ice crystals in the air become little mirrors, each reflecting a world, and every man becomes his own orbiting cloud of sudden stars. It's beautiful, if you forget that it paints everyone. For 6 beats, the over-snow rope rig Koskinen's patrol used to go up and along becomes a faint line of shine where it wasn't properly dusted. They had brushed, then brushed again, then tugged cloth to dull, but in 2 spans a quick man's glove had missed a knot's metal. Hietala sees both bright pricks up and along and hears his breath leave him in a shape like a prayer. Does Petrov see? He squints, green burning his eyes, everything haloed. He sees movement that is not movement, shimmering, and decides to push on the error that seems most mortal, the absence of prints. His boots pop off the skis, and he drives forward on foot for 3 steps to take a fallen man's place, plunging thigh-deep, post-holing in front of his own line. That new set of deep prints, wrong for skis, is the first true mark in the corridor, and Koskinen clicks his tongue in pity. He has primed his men with buttered rags on tips to kill squeak. Petrov's post holes sing when he yanks out raw sound that points. The DP-27 barks again, a disc spinning, and splashes of snow eat the ground where Hietala had been. He had moved after the green flare by 1 body width, and a thought by habit, and now he slides his rifle barrel through a V in the roots and sights low. You do not shoot at silhouettes in their middle at night, not when clothing is zipped with empty air. You shoot at places where fabric wraps bone tight. He takes Petrov's man at the calf where the pant clings to tendon and hears the sound of a startled old man, not a soldier, leave an enemy's body, because the cold makes every young voice crack when in pain. Snow screens give, 1 binding cut by stray fire. The bedsheet loses tension, sags, reads suddenly as cloth, not a man, and the Soviets who had been comfortably pouring bullets at an idea falter. The absence of an opponent to pour onto is a mental winter. Men reach for errors to load. Petrov, calf hit thou still moving, points and barks new sectors, trying to stiffen the column. The psychology is visible. When a decoy is admitted as decoy, the hunter wants to take ground to find prey, and taking ground into a kill lane is the next thing offered. He orders a rush over a narrow clearing, forgetting the lens of the night, forgetting that the slit lanes were carved to catch briquettes of men tumbling through. Koskinen lets them run 3 steps, then thumbs the LS-26's trigger and spritzes a line of short bursts, shoulders set as if bracing a door. The muzzle washed with blanket breathes. The rag drinks heat and gives it back as fog that twines upward and then breaks. Tracers aren't in his belt, Nobody wants to draw a line back to their own eye, so his bullets express themselves only in the way snow leaps from trunks and knees. Hietala, 2 lanes down, times 3 single shots into that same run, not quick but deliberate, 1, 2, 3, on the drumbeat of men hitting crust, and then the long quiet as the column stalls in the open seam. Silence now has weight. The glass on Koskinen's map slate gets a skin of hoarfrost with each breath. He keeps it under a shawl for that reason, and still its grease pencil lines smear and bloom like black moss. He redraws the logging road, sketches the bog, marks the kill box with an X that he wipes away with a mitt as soon as he can see the result of its mark in the woods,